Every morning, billions of people trust something they have never seen. They depend on it. They build companies around it. They exchange value through it. They make decisions using it. They cross borders because of it. And if it disappeared tomorrow, the world would become a very confusing place. Most people think civilization is held together by roads, by electricity, by governments, or by the internet. Those things matter. But beneath all of them, there's another layer. A layer almost nobody notices until it stops working. Because civilization has a problem that has existed since humans first began living together. Not how to create knowledge, not how to discover ideas, but how to keep them. A person can remember a conversation. A family can remember a tradition. A community can remember a story. But what happens when a civilization becomes too large for human memory? When thousands of people depend on information no single person could possibly know. When a farmer needs to know who owns a piece of land. When a merchant needs to know who owes a payment. When a government needs to know how many people live inside its borders. Someone has to remember. And eventually, humanity discovered something extraordinary. Memory did not have to stay inside the human mind. For most of human history, knowledge lived inside people. A village elder carried history. A craftsman carried techniques. A storyteller carried legends. Information traveled from person to person. This worked surprisingly well. Small communities could survive this way. But there was a hidden weakness. Human memory disappears with humans. When a person dies, some knowledge disappears with them. A skill, a story, a lesson learned from experience, a mistake that should never be repeated. Humanity needed a way to make knowledge survive longer than a lifetime. So humans began creating something new. Not a machine, not a computer, a second place for knowledge to exist. The earliest forms were simple. A mark carved in a bone, a symbol pressed into clay, a drawing on a cave wall. At first, these marks were not trying to create literature. They were solving practical problems. How many animals were owned? How much grain was stored? Who traded with whom? Where was a boundary? What agreement was made? A small mark could carry a big idea. This happened. This belongs to someone. This must be remembered. For the first time, human memory had a physical extension. A message could survive the person who created it. A record could travel through time. A promise could exist even after the people involved were gone. Thousands of years later, this simple idea transformed civilization. Writing allowed kingdoms to grow, because a ruler no longer had to personally remember every decision. A government could create laws. A business could track trade. A society could preserve knowledge. The written word became humanity's first large-scale memory system. But something interesting happened. Success created a new problem. The more humans remembered, the harder it became to find anything. A village with 10 records has no problem. A kingdom with thousands of records has a challenge. Where's the information? Who created it? When was it created? Is it still accurate? The problem changed. Humans had solved forgetting. Now they had to solve finding. This is a pattern that appears throughout history. Every solution creates a new problem. The first records solved memory. More records created complexity. Complexity created the need for organization. Organization created archives. Archives created libraries. Libraries created systems for classification. Humanity was not simply collecting information. It was learning how to manage information. The ancient world understood this challenge. Archives were not simply rooms full of old documents. They were attempts to create organized memory. A place where knowledge could survive. A place where future generations could find what the past had learned. Libraries took this idea even further. They were not just collections of books. They were maps of human knowledge. A book sitting somewhere unknown is just an object. But a book that can be found, cataloged, and connected to other ideas becomes part of a living system. The difference between a pile of information and knowledge is organization. This idea appears everywhere. A farmer does not only need seeds. They need to know when to plant. A ship does not only need wood. It needs maps. A doctor does not only need medicine. They need knowledge of what worked before. Human progress depends not only on creating new information, but on preserving and accessing old information. Civilization is a conversation between generations. The past speaks, the present listens, the future builds, and records are the language that allows that conversation to continue. But then something changed. Human societies became much larger. Cities grew, trade expanded, governments became more complex. Businesses started operating across huge distances. The amount of information exploded. A merchant no longer had 10 customers. A bank no longer had 10 accounts. A government no longer managed one village. The old methods began reaching their limits. A person with a notebook could manage a small business. A person with a filing cabinet could manage more. But what happens when an organization has millions of customers? Millions of transactions? Millions of records? Paper was powerful, but paper had limits. By the 1800s, the world was entering a new information crisis. Not a crisis because information disappeared. A crisis because there was too much of it. Railroads needed schedules. Companies needed employee records. Banks needed account histories. Insurance companies needed customer information. Governments needed population records. The modern world was being built, and it was generating a problem nobody had faced before. Humanity had created so much memory that humans could no longer manage it alone. One example shows how serious this became. In the United States, the population census became increasingly difficult. Counting people sounds simple, but behind every person is information. Names, locations, families, occupations, statistics. By the late 19th century, processing this information manually took years. The country was growing faster than its ability to organize itself. The problem was no longer, how do we remember? The problem became, how do we process what we remember? And this question created the next transformation. For thousands of years, humans extended memory using symbols. Clay, paper, books, files. But now, humanity began searching for something new, a way for machines to help organize information. Not replace human thinking, not create intelligence, simply help with the enormous task of remembering. The first step was not a computer. It was something much simpler. A card, a hole, and a machine that could read patterns. For the first time, information was no longer only created for humans to read. It was created in a form a machine could understand. Instead of a person looking through thousands of pages, a machine could process thousands of records. The information itself had not changed. The names were still names. The numbers were still numbers. The records were still records. But the relationship between humans and information had changed. Humans were no longer only storing knowledge. They were creating systems that could work with knowledge. This transformation accelerated. Machines became faster. Electricity became widespread. Computers appeared. And suddenly, humanity had created something completely new. A machine that could not only calculate, but store enormous amounts of information. The computer did not invent the need for memory. Humanity had been solving that problem for thousands of years. The computer simply became the most powerful memory tool humans had ever created. But even computers created a new challenge. Having information stored somewhere was not enough. A computer filled with random files is not a useful memory. It is a digital pile of documents. The system needed structure. It needed rules. It needed relationships. It needed a way to answer questions. Where is this information? How is this information connected? Who can access it? When was it changed? What happened before this? The world needed more than storage. It needed organized digital memory. And this is where one of the most important inventions of the digital age emerged. The database. A word that sounds technical. A word that sounds like something only programmers should care about. But the idea behind it is ancient. A database is humanity solving the same problem it has always faced. How do we remember? How do we organize what we remember? How do we find it when we need it? A modern database is not just a place where information sits. It is a system designed around relationships. A customer is connected to an account. A patient is connected to a medical history. A product is connected to inventory. A video is connected to a creator. A location is connected to a map. Everything has relationships, and those relationships are what make modern civilization possible. Think about opening your phone. You don't see a giant machine somewhere keeping your life organized. You simply see an app. But behind that simple screen, there is a system answering thousands of questions. Who are you? What information belongs to you? What should appear first? What happened before? What should happen next? Every tap you make creates a conversation with systems built to remember. When you open a banking app, you are accessing a record of ownership. When you send a message, you're interacting with stored information about people, conversations, and time. When you watch a video, a system remembers what exists, who created it, and how people interact with it. When you ask an AI a question, behind that experience are enormous systems storing and processing information. The modern world feels immediate, but beneath the surface, it is constantly remembering. This is why these systems became one of the foundations of civilization. Not because people love them. Most people never think about them. They are invisible by design. A great system disappears into everyday life. We don't think about electricity when we turn on a light. We don't think about roads when we drive. We don't think about communication networks when we send a message. And we don't think about digital memory when we use modern services. Until something goes wrong. A payment system fails. A website loses information. A hospital cannot access records. A service cannot find your account. Suddenly, the invisible memory becomes visible. We realize something important. Modern civilization is not only built on things we can see, it is built on systems quietly working underneath. But every record system creates the same question. Who controls the record? Who decides what is written? Who decides what can be changed? Who decides what can be trusted? For thousands of years, humans have created different answers. Clay tablets, paper documents, archives, libraries, ledgers, digital systems. Each one was another attempt to solve the same challenge. How do humans create trust in information? And as the world became more connected, that question became even more important. Because the future would not only ask, how do we remember? It would ask, who decides what is remembered? This is MrBit Insights, exploring the ideas, technologies, and stories changing how the world works.